for holiday vacations or Thanksgiving vacations. And so like a lot of our team they've retreated to families and are sort of like distributed all over the country. So yeah, I mean, if you can make it down to family, all the better.
Yeah, definitely. I think we dramatically underestimated what was in store for us. We were like, let's get groceries for a month and kind of see where we are. That month came and went. So this is how it is for
now. The run on flour, the run on yeast was pretty wild.
Yeah, definitely. I was one of the people in the rush for that, and got really into sourdough bread baking, made my own starter. I guess everybody's doing that right now, but
we did the same thing.
It's the most peaceful period in any day for me, is like,
feeding the starter.
Yeah, well, doing the whole ritual, whether it's feeding the starter or like making the dough and like making the bread, because it's things that you can't rush, right? You have to set it down, and it's going to be, all in a 10-hour process if you do everything right. So everything else is so rushed that, it works well.
Or a 3-day process.
Mm-hmm, that's right.
Actually, like a show of hands on the webinar as to who is nurturing a sourdough starter right now, and what have you called it? So we change our starter's name all the time. It's like one of my daughter's favorite things to do. Like this week, his name is Stinky, or she. It's sort of a gender neutral sourdough starter right now.
It's great. That's a good idea. I haven't gotten there yet, but there's a lot of potential there. You could do like googly eyes. You could do a little outfit, I imagine, if you wanted to.
Yeah.
So we're at 105. What do you say, Bryan? You want to jump into it?
Yeah, let's do it. I mean, I think more than anything, we've got a couple of slides to go through, but I've always found that opening it up for Q&A as quick as we can is a nice outcome and a good course of action. So I'm ready if you are.
Ready to rock. So I'm going to go ahead and start sharing my screen. We're going to go through the slides, but like Bryan said, really this is about you guys, and making sure that Bryan's got some incredible knowledge on this topic when it comes to which tools you should put together in order to have a highly effective stack. And anyone that's paying attention and watching the webinar here, ask questions freely. We're happy to step outside of what we're presenting and address those questions in real time so that you can benefit from Bryan's wealth of knowledge here. So Q&A has been tested, so you can just type in there any questions that you have. Group chat as well. I'm going to share my screen here and we'll jump right in.
Cool.
And okay, are you guys seeing the cover slide there? Bryan, you got the cover slide up?
I got it, yeah.
Okay, great.
I'm looking for my Zoom reactions to give you the thumbs up.
What's that?
I was looking for the Zoom reaction to give you the thumbs up, but apparently in this mode, I can't see it. So, but yes, I'll just give you the real thumbs up.
Perfect, thanks. So let's jump into it. 7 software tools used to launch a successful e-commerce brand during COVID-19. Pretty incredible story that Bryan's going to share with us. And we'll talk a little bit about our backgrounds, how we came to know one another. And, last time Bryan and I were talking in person, or actually not even in person, the first time we were talking on Zoom, I guess, Bryan shared with me some incredible work that he did to dramatically accelerate the launch of a brand with his new company, despite the fact that COVID-19 was just starting to hit New York and hit America in general. So we wanted to talk about that brand, how Bryan came to form it, talk about how Bryan put together the tools and which tools specifically he used in his stack to create an effective and flexible e-commerce brand, and then to talk about the crazy timeline that Bryan had to pivot into hitting in order to launch that brand in a timely fashion and what the results of that were. So that's what we're here to talk about today. Bryan, do you want to tell us a little bit about your background?
Yeah, I'll like a quick little bit on me, and then I'll debunk some of those myths. But hey, everyone, I'm Bryan. I'm the co-founder and chief technology officer at a company called Arfa. As I mentioned to those of you who are on the call, I'm New York based, but I'm originally from Montreal. And what that means is I'm a huge hockey fan and likely overly opinionated on the right way to bake a bagel. And just really quickly, there was a lot of like, Bryan did this and Bryan did that. I want to be one thing like crystal clear. We have an amazing team at Arfa. It's one of the reasons that we started the company, and I was so excited about what it was that we were up to. And we were able to launch Hickey, our first branded e-commerce play, in the way that we did because of the team we had. I was a small part of it, and I'm happy to share sort of the collective story about how we brought it to market amidst COVID-19.
Awesome, thanks, Bryan. So I'm David Campbell, co-founder and CEO of a company called Tropic. Tropic is a buyer enablement platform, and basically what that means for us is the founding team at Tropic came from the software vendor side, recognized that it's very difficult to kind of stay up to date on the best technology providers, what they cost, what they can do, who's most effective for your business. We started Tropic to basically take the guesswork out of that. And it was in some early conversations around the product that we got connected with Bryan, wanted to get his feedback on what we were building, and we've maintained contact since then. So excited to hear more about the arfa story today. So already touched on the agenda a little bit. First, we're going to talk more about arfa, what it is that arfa is doing in the world, and what the brand stands for, and what the products are that we can expect from them over time. Then we'll jump right into the tools. We'll talk specifically about the tools that arfa is using, and for their first brand, Hickey in particular, what tools are in the stack that enabled Hickey to do some incredible stuff. From there, we'll talk a little bit about the adjustment and strategy that arfa had to take in reaction to the COVID-19 challenge, which, if you look below that, is basically launching a brand new brand in 5 days, far ahead of schedule, and spending $0 on marketing to do it. So plenty to talk about there. I expect that we'll be speaking there for a while. At the end, we'll have some takeaways for you, just kind of thoughts on how arfa and Hickey in particular were able to do the things that they did. We'll open up for Q&A if there's any lingering questions at the end, and we can do that for as long as you guys would like to. And please stay tuned until the end. We have a special surprise that we're going to offer to people who are attending the webinar. We'll give you something for free at the end of it. So with that, let's jump right into it. Bryan, can you tell us a little bit about arfa? Uh-oh.
Yeah, so arfa is a platform for the creation of my internet connection is unstable. Of course it is. This is the way it needs to be. So arfa is a platform for the creation of a new type of consumer packaged goods. So we got started with a team of deeply experienced brand and e-commerce experts that have learned an awful lot throughout the years, and sort of felt like there was a better way to create brands and products. And so we've come together to do exactly that. Hickey was the first of the brands that we created that we intended to launch this year. And there was a few that were supposed to come on the back of Hickey that, like, all bets are off right now in the sort of the current world. But we've really taken a platform approach to everything that we do. And so the previous slide said, what are the 7 tools that you should be using? I'm not super dogmatic about the tools, but I do think that I'm a little bit more dogmatic about the approach, which is to say, use the best available tool for the job. And I don't think that that's necessarily one gigantic monolithic platform, but rather, like, what are the different specialist pieces that you can bring to bear on any given problem? Specific to arfa, we want to sort of group all of those different platforms together, or products together in one platform that we can use over and over and over again to launch brands quickly, efficiently, and profitably.
That's great. So let's talk a little bit about the tools. I know in the title we had the 7 tools. Looking at the slide, you can see there's more than 7.
Yeah.
What we wanted to capture here was some flexibility. So things have changed a little bit from launch until now, and it sounds like you've built a stack that enabled you to do that pretty easily. Do you want to maybe just talk us through, initially,
Sure.
What did you know that you needed to have in this stack, and how did you go about making those decisions?
Yeah, there's an awful lot of talk these days about a headless approach. And for the most part, I don't think there's a specific definition of what exactly is headless. We at arfa really believe in API first. And I sort of I'm going to throw monoliths under the bus an awful lot throughout this webinar. We really want to use the best available tool. So the first product or digital product that we launched was our corporate site, was arfa. This was sort of like announcing our arrival on the scene and sort of like teasing out why we existed and ultimately what we were up to. And we got started with a simple suite of tools to enable that experience. So we were using Contentful for content management, like truly like headless content management. We have Segment to instrument our site and collect our customer data. So using that as our customer data platform. And initially, arfa was deployed on top of Heroku. Heroku as sort of like being that go-to easy DevOps as a service platform to quickly get up and running. We were also not on the slide, but we're using Auth0 for authentication. So going back to this idea that arfa is a platform, we wanted to be able to have, from day one, this notion of an arfa passport. So you create one account with us at one time, and you should be able to use that seamlessly to move throughout every single product and platform that we would subsequently launch. So early on, day one, arfa is contentful at the top for headless content management, Segment as a customer data platform, Auth0 for authentication, deployed on top of Heroku. We Segment, for those of you that are familiar with it, persists all of the events that you send it into your own infrastructure, your own data warehouse. On top of that data warehouse, we stood up a Looker instance for BI more than anything else. And we twinned that with Yaguara, which is sort of a newcomer in the BI space. Like we think about Yaguara as being able to be a more approachable tool for most of our team, frankly. So if you apply the sort of like the 80-20 rule, 80% of your team should be able to get the insights and analytics they need on a platform like Yaguara. And then those that want to explore the data in a more technical or meaningful way, maybe your data science, your analyst team, they ultimately dive into Looker. So that was the first tech stack or suite of products that we put together and deployed, announcing the arrival of arfa. And I think that launched maybe 2 weeks before the world really got crazy, sort of like late February. It all feels like a super long time ago. Fast forward a few weeks, and we're getting ready for the launch of Hickey, and now this is e-commerce, so we need to layer on a couple of other pieces of functionality here. Most importantly, the ability to charge people for their order. So we got started on the Hickey stack, what we call the arfa commerce stack, with a very similar suite of tools that we were using over on arfa. So I think it would have been easy to reach for a tool like Shopify that would have done product management for us, cart, OMS. We did some experiments over there before deciding that didn't necessarily give us or afford us the portability that we were looking for. There's a couple of non-starters for us. One were payment profiles that were really under lock and key. We had enjoyed our experience thus far with Auth0. We like being able to bring our own authentication framework to the party. So we got started with using Contentful for product management. So we stood up a really simple product model that we could use to flesh out the sort of like the core shopping experience. We already knew how to deploy things on top of Heroku. We were obviously fluent in Segment. Now we needed a way to check out. So the one thing that we really liked about Shopify was a hosted checkout. So before starting arfa, I was at a company called Glossier for 4.5 years. And I think for every single one of those days that I was there, I worried about the checkout going down. I didn't sleep all that well, and we would have crazy spikes of traffic, an enormously popular brand. And for the most part, the checkout withstood the traffic that we sent to it. But given the opportunity to do it all again, I wanted to give away the responsibility of having the checkout stay up. Also wanted to try to find a tool and a platform that was optimized for mobile conversion. I mean, what I saw at Glossier, the number of checkout or conversions that were happening on mobile, like that's, I mean, I'm not sharing any deep knowledge here, but like this is a trend that we're only going to see continue and get more and more important. So we wanted to be able to give away some of that responsibility. We reached for Stripe. So Stripe is the incumbent in the payment space. They're also a company that prioritizes great documentation, open APIs, has a great community, like everything that I would be looking for as an engineer trying to create my own product around world-class infrastructure. Like they do that better than anyone. And they had recently launched a product called the Stripe Checkout. And we'd had a ton of experience with Stripe Elements. A lot of the Glossier checkout was built on top of that. But now Checkout brought that all under one roof, and we were able to queue up an order and essentially send it over to Stripe and say like, hey, here's an order, here are the line items, please process this payment for us and let us know when that payment happens successfully. It worked out of the box like nearly flawlessly. And so that gave us confidence to not necessarily reach for a tool like Shopify. We understood exactly how to create the product page experience that we wanted. We knew how to create a really simple cart, and then we handed that responsibility over to Stripe to complete that checkout for us. And so that was the beginnings. That's really started to help shape what the commerce platform was going to look like. If you were to check out on Hickey, actually you can't check out right now. We're out of stock everywhere, and I'll get to that story in just a sec. But you would have seen that in action, and it worked really great. So Hickey was live processing transactions for the better part of a month, and we had, I'm like so proud to say this, 0 checkout defects, and that's pretty fun. Some other tools that we were using. So internally, the engineering team loves Clubhouse. So we're not super precious about any agile methodologies, but we do follow iterations. We like to sort of build our software in sprints. Clubhouse lets us do that. It integrates with everything that we like. I mentioned this before, we're still using Segment. The data is still being persisted to the same data warehouse that we're looking at via Looker and Yaguara. We got started deploying Hickey to Heroku in the same way that we had deployed Arfa. As we got a little bit closer to production, we reached to a tool that I had an awful lot of experience with called Cloud 66, which is DevOps as a service again, but where you're deploying your instances to your own cloud infrastructure. And so one of the knocks against Heroku is as you scale up, you're not guaranteed to get every ounce of CPU out of those dynos. And so we wanted a little bit more close to the metal control over our sites, over our load balancers, over the firewall, all of those really fun, sexy things. So we went back to Cloud 66, which is a setup we knew really well. We're still using Heroku for our PR based workflow review apps that their pipeline spins up really elegantly. So Hickey.com is now deployed via Cloud 66 on AWS. In the interest of consistency, we moved Arfa over there as well. And then there's a logo down the bottom left right here for Clay. Clay is a fun platform that we discovered early on that we're using as a more sophisticated bring your own code to Zapier type platform that enables some pretty interesting workflows that have become mission critical for us. The last logo, which is a new addition as of 2 weeks ago, is Netlify. So the next iteration, the V2 of the Arfa Commerce stack, moves us closer to the statically generated site. I'm going to use air quotes here, promised land. So our next branded e-commerce experience that will be shipped, instead of having server-side rendered code, will be entirely statically generated. And we're using Netlify as a replacement for Heroku to deploy those applications, which are essentially React applications that we're using Gatsby to build the sites for. And Netlify is taking care of the build process for us in an exceptionally elegant way. So if you're used to the way that Heroku works and the way that it integrates with GitHub and all of the other tools, including your CI and CD tools, and you want to get started with static site generation, Netlify is a great resource to reach for. So a lot of tools you talked about, I don't think you necessarily need to use those tools, but hopefully this sort of illustrates the point that you can build a pretty complete stack by bringing together what I would argue are some of the best available tools for the job. It's important to keep in mind that your customer, the person who is experiencing your app or your site, they don't care what you're using behind the scenes. They just want something that is fast, that looks good, that has the right words, and that works. I want tools that allow my team to iterate really quickly, and be it the internal teams that are managing the content, the brand managers that need to merchandise the site, or the data team that needs to feed analytics and insights back to the company. I want to give them the best tools for the job as well. And I think the collection we have here for us right now are the best tools for the job.
Thanks, Bryan. That was great. And, we at Tropic, obviously, one of our favorite things is to expose, larger companies to earlier stage companies that are doing really interesting things they may not be aware of. And oftentimes it's a lot more cost effective than like the enterprise alternative. So we were really excited to see Aguara and Clay here. Really cool companies. Before we move on from here, we have 2 questions here in the Q&A.
Yeah.
So the first
Cool.
question is, what about A/B testing? Was that a consideration in the stack, and how did you guys handle that?
Yeah, so Nicholas, this is a great question. We have experience with the 2 splits. So Split RB, which is the open source Ruby project, and also Split.io. So Split.io, so this slide is hilarious. It says 7 tools, but Dave and I, over the last couple of minutes, have like added 3 more. So now it's 10. I left Split out. So Split is part of our stack. It's there. We can deploy tests if we want. We haven't done it yet because like the content on arfa is quite simple. The shopping experience on Hickey doesn't warrant A/B testing just yet. So Split.io is a great tool. I like it an awful lot. It does a couple of things for us. It allows us to do feature flagging and A/B testing all on one platform. I think oftentimes those 2 services can be conflated. I have, for most of my career, steered clear of A/B testing solutions that are exclusively client side. I think of performance as a feature and speed as a feature, and anything that is getting rendered client side to me is a little bit of a smell. So I'm a fan of doing it yourself using an open source tool, or like we started with a greenfield stack and we reached right for Split. So hopefully that answers the question.
And how about Bolt?
Bolt. No, I didn't see Bolt. We took a look at Fast. So Fast.co is a newcomer in the space, and I ultimately had an opportunity to meet with the team there as well, and it validated the approach that we were taking. Fast, for those of you that haven't seen it, like it's this add a checkout to anything, which I think is a pretty neat approach. Under the hood, they're using Auth0 and Stripe, like the 2 tools that we've built the Arfa Commerce stack on top of. So because we're taking this platform approach to the way that we're launching brands, it was important to me that we control all of the data. Like I look at the data that our customers are giving to us, or giving is too strong a word, in fact, lending to us for some amount of time as a responsibility that I take really seriously. So to the extent that we can own and control the platforms that are collecting that data so that we can protect it, so that we can use that data to make a better experience, that's what I want to do. So I'm reluctant to give away too much data. So hadn't seen Bolt, but it's neat to see an awful lot of these new checkout providers coming up. I think that's sort of indicative of the move to headless, and yeah, I mean, the more the merrier. I think it just makes all checkout providers get smarter and better at what they're doing.
Okay, so let's shift gears now and talk a little bit about where you were in
that
time.
Picture.
Yeah, with where you were in time with Hickey, what the plan was. Obviously, COVID-19 isn't news to anybody that created challenges, but I think that your timing was really uniquely, positioned against the oncoming COVID-19 wave, and you guys adjusted quickly. So can you just maybe talk us through what was happening, what was the plan, and how was it changing in real time as this started to reach America?
Yeah, sure. So I'm going to do my best to remember the exact timeline here. And first, shout out to anyone who's working in digital product, but also physical product. I think physical product is really complicates things. So I mentioned before that Arfa is the platform for the creation of multiple consumer product brands. And so when we started to become really concerned, I would say in mid-January probably, about the potential for a pandemic, the ops team really got to work on dual sourcing where we were getting our components from. So this isn't just a matter of choosing the right digital tools that allow us to launch an app or a website, but we have to think about the product that we need to put into warehouses that we need to ultimately ship to our customers who are trusting us with their money. So the good news for us with Hickey is that product was already in the warehouse. So we had some control over the timing around our launch, and like any sort of we'd spent a lot of time thinking about what was the right way to launch arfa, what was the right way to launch, to introduce arfa to the world, to introduce the collective. So arfa has this concept of a collective, which is really a group of stakeholders that have come together to help us create the brand and create the products. So, you know, the nuance here for us is that we're creating products along with the very same people that those products seek to serve. So we really wanted to do right by all of the people that had helped us create this brand that we are really proud of. And so the original thinking was we launch arfa, we create a little bit of like a news cycle around that, and then a few weeks later we release Hickey as the sort of like the first data point for this new platform that exists that is called arfa. Originally, I think we had planned on, with the press team, leaving 4 weeks between the launch of arfa and the launch of Hickey, just to sort of build that intrigue. Arfa launched in mid-February, so now the COVID-19 is like a real thing, but we're still not sure like just how real it is. We launch arfa from within the arfa office. It's a real it's a fun celebratory launch day. Launch goes off without a hitch for the most part. There's no transactions, so that's a safer product to deploy. And then I think we have like a day or two to catch our breath. I think we launched on a Tuesday. On Thursday, we sent everyone home and we said Friday is a mandatory work from home day. We need to make sure that we're going to be ready in the event that everyone has to now start working from home. On Friday afternoon, we basically called people and said, like, you know, the office is closed until further notice. And then we start thinking about when is the right time to launch Hickey. And early on, the conversation was, how do we stay ahead of what was going to be an increasingly negative news cycle? To be kind of like mercenary about it, our launch strategy involved some support from the press. And like, so the way that you launch a physical product is you seed it with people who are going to write a story about it. Well, if those stories don't land or don't resonate because everyone is just focused on the pandemic, and rightfully so, should we launch at all is a question that we were asking ourselves. And so we decided as a team to try to pull up the launch. So let's, you know, we had identified this narrow window where we thought, yes, there was a negative news cycle, but we had launched arfa, we started the engine, and we needed to complete that narrative. And so we chopped a couple of weeks out of our timeline, and we said, okay, like, we're going to launch on such and such a date. And at this point, everyone is now working from home, and I'll try to speed up the story here. And as the news is just getting worse and worse, and you know, our team is getting used to working from home, we again came together and asked ourselves the question: is it an appropriate time to put a brand out in the world for sale? And ultimately, I think it was a Thursday, and the team was sprinting to get the site ready, to get the final assets in. We decided that no, it was not appropriate, and that we were going to delay the launch. And so Henry, who's one of my co-founders and the CEO of the company, called the board to let them know that we were not going to launch Hickey, that the time was just not right, and that we'd regroup and perhaps reconsider a launch in May. And we delivered that message to the team, like, thank you so much for your hard work, and I know we're sprinting at this, but we're not going to launch. The time is just not right. This was on a Friday. Told everyone to basically take the rest of the day off. We continued to chat about it, the executive team, the founding team, and like, you know, we've been working so hard at this. We wanted to find a way to launch, and I don't remember whose idea it was, but it was a brilliant idea. Let's launch Hickey, but let's give the product away. Let's give the product away to people that are a part of this collective movement. Let's give the product away, most importantly, to first responders. And so we told everyone, the entire team, on Friday that we weren't going to launch. I called them on Saturday to say, guess what? We are going to launch. We're going to try to launch on Tuesday. Oh, and by the way, instead of charging for the product, we're now giving it away for free. And we need a way to assert that people are first responders, so that we don't charge them anything for the product, that we prioritize them getting their hands on it. And so we said, like, take the rest of the weekend, we'll come together on Monday, we'll figure out how to change the scope and the shape of the launch, and we'll launch whatever we can launch on Tuesday. You know, whatever it's going to be is what it's going to be. And the engineering team and the digital product team, to their credit, like believed in the mission so much. Like we got off the Zoom call on Saturday and pull requests were getting opened right away. Like there was just no way that we could stop people from getting to work right away to make sure that the experience that we were putting out there in the world was the best that it could be. And we launched Hickey that Tuesday. It was a Herculean effort to change the checkout experience, to change the messaging, to introduce this new approval flow. And the launch went off without a hitch. And there's a lot of other brands, and I think this is wonderful, that have subsequently stepped up and given product away, but really proud to say that Hickey was the first. And we, to this day, like believe that that was the right way for us to launch this product. We've given away an insane amount of product. We had earmarked a certain amount. We've burned through that. And now if you go to hickey.com today, you'll see that we're sold out. We're excited to bring Hickey back. We're restocking the warehouse. We're trying to figure out right now what is the appropriate launch date. It's coming soon, and I'm excited to launch the next iteration of Hickey on the next version of the arfa commerce platform, and this time charge people real money for what is a great product. I have some here. Ever the salesman. But if you're looking for a natural deodorant that actually works, I've got a couple of them here. Branding is awesome. Product works really well. I've been using it for the better part of a year, and I have given it some really positive reviews on our site. That's our antiperspirant. There's a whole suite of products. So yeah, that's the story. I tried to make it short, but I think I was reasonably long-winded.
I think you were right on time, Bryan. I think that was perfect.
Okay.
It'd be great if you wouldn't mind. Let's talk a little bit about, I think a lot of the people that are here at the webinar, and certainly a lot of the people that we talk to on a daily basis at Tropic, are trying to figure out this headless thing. And, people are wondering, like, is this something we should be doing? I think there's some anxiety associated with making a switch like that. Can you talk about how that stack helped this come together? And maybe also talk about what this would have been like if you had the safe stack, right? I think it'd be good to riff on that for a minute or two, if you don't mind.
Yeah. So, I mean, to get right to the point, like headless is the right approach. You definitely do it, invest in it. Like whether it's like headless, basically, you don't want to put all your eggs in one basket, I guess. I also don't think it needs to be a big bang. If you want to get started, if you are on a monolithic platform and it's working, that's great. And if you want to dip your toes into what an API first infrastructure might look like, what sort of optionality or flexibility or nimbleness that will afford you, you can start chipping away at certain portions of your stack. And I think it's probably easiest to get started with content management, taking a headless approach to content management. And with so much of web development shifting to client side and like these pretty advanced frameworks these days, like you can just choose a single feature and have that feature interface directly with a really great world-class API for you to consume your content and like start to get used to things in that way. I believe that headless e-commerce is a little bit trickier to get right. So early on, as we were sort of trying to imagine what the arfa commerce stack would look like, we took a really headless approach to Shopify. The team at Shopify is really bullish on headless e-commerce too. Their sort of like massive app ecosystem makes it a little bit more complicated. Like that pulls you into the monolith quicker than you would realize. But they're one of the largest contributors to the GraphQL movement. Their GraphQL, not that GraphQL is synonymous with headless, but there's more than just GraphQL over there. But yeah, you can use Shopify in a headless way too. You just have to, you'll be a little bit of a trailblazer. So I think the fact that we had a content team that understood the content tools, Contentflow is what we are using. They had been using it for months to get arfa ready. They were really familiar with how it worked with Hickey. They were able to adjust really quickly. We had a really lightweight order management system. So as we needed to change the way that order approvals were happening, how we were charging for product, we were able to like parachute in another solution there to bring those teams together. And that was really quick. So the fact that we were API first everywhere and that we really owned the way that their data was being passed back and forth between the different systems made it possible for us in honestly 36 hours to put in a pretty sophisticated approval system that made sure that if you placed an order, it was approved, the warehouse got it, and it was shipped out as quickly as possible. I think that would have been more difficult for us to do, certainly riskier under significant load if we had been on more of a monolithic platform, where you need to coordinate the changes to the front end, to the admin, to the database, all at once, as opposed to having them be more isolated and just making more precision cuts, I guess.
That's great. Thanks, Bryan. And again, congrats on launching Hickey. Awesome story, and huge fans of how you did that at Tropic. Really, really cool stuff. We have another question here.
Yeah.
Yeah. So, and maybe we can both weigh in on this one. Let's see what you think first. The question is, how would you deal with one of these tools doubling its price while they're now foundational? Might have happened to us at a certain brand. How different are the contracts with these vital tools?
Yeah, I feel badly. I think I introduced Aldo to the company that you're talking about. Well, I mean, I think if it doubled its price, it probably just didn't double its price, but you likely doubled the amount of either content that you were managing or monthly tracked users that you were sending the platform. So you sort of like earned the right to have your price go up, I would say. So I go back to the point I made earlier about I'm going to throw the monolith under the bus a little bit. So the best way to build infrastructure around some of these tools is a way that you're preserving some amount of portability. So I'll use the example, and some of those examples are easier to pivot from than others. Your customer data platform, if you have a really well thought out event tracking plan, the way that you've instrumented it is like reasonably generic. If you're in a difficult negotiation, while it would be painful to replatform, it's definitely possible. I think about the way that we had deployed our site on Heroku and we wanted to move it to AWS. That took 45 minutes. So the way that we manage our deployments, mostly like through Circle CI that we're using for CI and CD, we just changed a few pieces and it quote unquote just worked. So that's tough if the pricing changes significantly and you didn't anticipate it. I think using the best tools for the job sometimes also means understanding who the vendor is and having a really great relationship with them, and hopefully you can arrive at a solution that is agreeable for both parties.
Yeah, thanks, Bryan. And what I would add to that is, from the Tropic perspective, we're often kind of looking at the trade-offs between the value and the cost of different providers. We're huge fans of the providers that were listed here, and sorry if you had a negative experience, but I think it also comes down to how is the agreement initially negotiated, and if the agreement, there are ways that you can build certain fail-safes into that negotiation up front. Maybe those are trade-offs that you make in exchange for a longer-term commitment where you have kind of more protection on how the cost grows. The other thing is, we think it's often, even if it's a provider that you really like, it's always worth taking a refresh and looking at the space if you have a renewal coming up. So you want to have kind of thoughtful management around when renewal dates are going to be coming up for agreements that you have in place. And at those moments, if there's a scrappier company that might offer a better deal, either, to Bryan's point, there's an opportunity to make a switch, or at a minimum, there's an opportunity to make sure that you're kind of getting right-sized value from your existing provider because you've done the diligence and you have another offer on the table. And then there's another thing that, isn't something necessarily that Tropic does, but spend management is a good way to kind of get in front of these things. If you have awareness of what your consumption is like with these tools, and you have awareness of spikes and the utility of those tools, you still kind of find yourself in a situation where there is an increase in spend, but you might identify that increase earlier and have a conversation with the vendor sooner to get out from underneath it. So we have another question here as well. From Elizabeth. Any tools that help conceive the creative side of building a new product or brand?
Good question. Elizabeth, I think Alex, who's back working with us at Arfa. He's probably in a better position to answer this story. I can tell you like some of the tools that we're using in terms of envisioning or storyboarding or collaboration that the team makes makes massive use of Miro. I think I don't think we're necessarily the only ones that product has done a really great job. Beyond that, it's the usual suspects. Like there's part of the team that uses Sketch, and others that are using Figma, and like there's still a bunch of the Adobe suite that still exists. On the user testing side of things, like we tend to be pretty scrappy there. So we'll build static prototypes, get them in front of users, and ask them what they think. That's what the design process looks like for the most part. Does that help? I'm like waiting for an answer, but.
And you said Miro, Bryan? M-I-R-O?
Yeah.
Oh, Miro's awesome. We love
it's amazing.
We do everything in Miro. I like it better than a physical whiteboard. Like it was actually like when we had to go fully reliant on Miro from working remotely and not having the physical whiteboard, you can do more with it. You can fit more in there. Miro's
now they have a ton of money, so it'll be interesting to see what features they add next.
Definitely. We have another question here in the chat. The question is, what are you using for PDP or add to cart?
What are we using for PDP? So it's entirely bespoke, I would say. So every word that you see on either arfa.co or hickey.com is content managed via Contentful. And so there isn't a delineation between an FAQ page and a PDP page, where oftentimes you'd have that content fragmented between your commerce platform and your content management platform. I think that's a smell for the most part. And like, I felt a ton of pain there. Like I've been working on e-commerce sites I'm going to make myself seem really old here, but like for 15 or 20 years, and having everything in one place on the right platform has been like a massive unlock. Add to cart, we are using an open source e-commerce framework as an OMS, and it is also providing us the infrastructure we need to create an order. So a cart is really an order that has a state, which is state. When you start the checkout, we start moving you through a state machine. So you go from a cart to an address to delivery, and then when you go from payment to complete, that becomes the responsibility of Stripe. And the beauty of the Stripe checkout is our products don't need to be created on their platform. We basically send them a fully baked order for the most part. Here are the line items. Here's how much we want to charge for shipping. Here's what we want to charge for tax. You take care of the rest. So it's super lightweight. I mean, you can imagine the content model that you need to create a product display page is pretty straightforward. It's pretty well known. And the magic of something like a Contentful is that as your product gets more complicated, it's pretty easy to add additional fields. In fact, like the brand team is doing it themselves. And I think that's really fun. Yeah, merchandising in Contentful. Are you crazy? No, not at all. We create different catalog objects. We add products to those catalogs. It's amazing. And if you do it the right way, where you use environments, it's easy enough to clone an entire Contentful environment to another environment that is looking at a different staging server, and you can try out different merchandising setups. I mean, I think are we crazy? No. I mean, how many SKUs do we have? 10. So merchandising is only so complex for us right now. If I was managing a product catalog of thousands of products, I'd want to get a little bit fancier about the way that I do merchandising. I would want to use more data. I think merchandising is also an area where you can get too cute. I think like implemented search is another tool that we didn't talk about, but we're using Algolia for search. But search is an excellent way of merchandising too. Like meet customers where they are. It might be a little bit trite to say, but there's plenty of ways to do it.
How about tools to better monitor supply chain?
Right. Yeah. Good question. There's this like really amazing tool that we use for this called Google Sheets. Maybe you've heard of it. We're not super sophisticated there yet. We're really friendly with a company. There's a startup operating in the space called Anvil. A couple of like really smart people that have come from some pretty badass supply chain heavy companies. So I think as our business gets more sophisticated, we'll lean a little bit more heavily on Anvil. But yeah, I mean, like where we can bring technology to bear to solve problems, we definitely want to do that. well known for saying I believe in the theory of pain-driven development. So I want to engineer solutions where my customer, be it like an internal facing customer or the clients that are purchasing our products, are feeling pain. And I try not to over engineer. And if we choose the right tools and we remain nimble, we're okay to tolerate a little bit of pain if we're able to resolve that pain in short order.
Yeah, I want to use that opportunity to also shout out Anvil. So we're part of a program called Grand Central Tech at Tropic. We're a startup in residence. Anvil went through the same program and is still in the same building. And those guys are awesome. So
yeah,
2 shout outs really. Shout out to Grand Central Tech and then also to Anvil.
Elizabeth, I just snoozed your question or made it disappear. I'm sorry, but I will email you and like let's talk about creative tools. But we basically we all agree that Miro is awesome. That's what we're using for storyboarding and feature development and storytelling and road mapping. We're using it for a ton of things. But then more on the creative side, I can talk to you more about that as well.
Okay. Are there any other questions for Bryan while we have everyone here? I guess there's going to be like a bit of a long tail on the response to that, given the format, huh? Well, we'll give everyone a couple seconds. Okay, we actually still have a little more time because we have one more slide to talk through. So thank you so much, Bryan. And just in closing here, I mentioned that we were going to be giving something away for the attendees of this webinar. So Tropic has a product that we've rolled out where we deliver a free marketing e-commerce stack assessment. So basically the way Tropic works, we have a platform that sees lots of technology decisions and categorizes the reasons that those decisions are made. And we basically are using this to ensure that we have information at the cutting edge in terms of technology delivery and also in terms of cost. So if you'd like us to take a look at what you have in your stack and what contracts you're in, we're happy to do that. And what we can point out is if there are any areas where you're overspending on your tool set, if you want to get benchmarks on each category that you're in terms of which tools should be in the stack broadly, depending on what stage you're at, and which vendors are the strongest in those different categories, we can help with that. And if you want some insight into what your peer group is using at different stages, we can provide insight for that as well. So if you're interested in redeeming this, you can just email info@tropicapp.io with the subject line free assessment. We also have a landing page that we'll send out along with the notes for the webinar. And you can get in touch with us that way if you'd like to take a look. And Bryan, any parting thoughts before we call it a day?
Parting thoughts, like I mean, what's appropriate to say this in these times? Like stay safe, stay healthy, take chances. I would say that, you know, it's our jobs as if you work in tech or if you work in product to stay abreast of what the best available tools for the job are. It doesn't necessarily mean you need to throw everything that you have out. Chip away at different things, and now's an amazing time. Like we're going through. I wouldn't keep saying like we can't wait for things to get back to normal. I mean, things aren't going to get back to normal. Like it's our jobs and responsibility and opportunity to help define what exactly that normal is going to be. So I like to think that for me, I'm like equal parts nervous and excited about what happens next. And from my experience, like that's when I do my best work. And so like really trying to balance out those two is what I'm optimizing for.
Thanks, Bryan. Oh, we have one last question.
Yeah.
How do you decide when it's the right time to make a change to your tools?
Pain-driven development. You know, if I like to say no at first, and then I like to say no a second time. But if a question keeps coming up and someone is feeling like a real amount of pain, or maybe the relationship with the vendor has run its course, they've become too enterprise for their own good. Like it could be a variety of reasons. If we're starting to see negative performance, if we're worried about security, if we're worried about their approach, then we'll start to consider alternatives. There might also be something that has come along. So I'll use BI as an example. For the longest time, I've been a huge supporter and fan of Looker. It's brought a ton of value to teams that I've worked with in the past. And Looker's also been, like, as the company has grown, can be complex to maintain. And I think the best way of doing it is either have like an exceptionally clean data model, which is not true for everyone, or you build a data team, and then along comes a tool like Yaguara, and going back to this idea of like kind of like 80/20ing it. And if our data is pretty good, we can rely on their platform to do some amount of work to clean it up and give our teams access to the metrics they need to be able to do their jobs. And I think that that doesn't mean that we're replacing Looker, but we're able to complement it with something else. And so, opportunities like that are kind of great.
Awesome. Well, once again, thanks, Bryan. Congratulations on arfa and specifically on launching Hickey. Incredible story. And, thanks for illuminating us on how to go about building a flexible stack. To everyone who attended, like I said, we'll send the notes out and make sure that you guys have the follow-up information in case you want to dig deeper on any of this stuff. And, let's all thank Bryan one more time. And like you said, stay safe, everybody. And we'll see you. We'll see you when we see you.
Yeah, thanks everyone. Thanks for the great questions.
All right. Bye all.
Bye.